Do you see any sense to that? There may be giants. That recording I have on, the new one, did you hear it? I changed it. I took off the intellectuals. I put on there may be giants.
What?
Whose they may be giants?
What are you talking about?
That's what's on the phone. There may be... Well, I can't explain it because I don't know what it is.
Welcome to Amusing Jews, where we celebrate Jewish contributors and contributions to American popular culture. I'm Jonathan Friedmann.
And I'm Joey Angelfield.
Producer-engineer Mike Tomren is working somewhere behind the scenes. Amusing Jews is a project of Adat Chaverim Congregation for Humanistic Judaism, the Jewish Museum of the American West, and Atheists United Studios. Hey Joey, when does fan art become pro art? One possibility is when the band decides to use your art on their t-shirt.
We're delighted to talk with Kelilah Miller, an artist and rabbi whose linocut design is featured on a new shirt from They Might Be Giants. Kelilah, welcome to Amusing Jews.
Thanks, great to be here.
You've done a series of linocuts featuring lyric fragments from songs by They Might Be Giants. For the uninitiated, what is a linocut?
A linocut actually, it's a linoleum cut, and it's a little bit of a misnomer. There are lots of different kinds of block prints. I do work in linoleum now, so this is a little piece of it. So basically, you draw your design, and then you cut away all the material that you don't want to be part of it, and then you ink it and you print it as many times as you want. For this project, I was actually not yet graduated to linoleum, so they're actually rubber cuts. More or less the same material you see like a pink eraser, but it's the same idea.
Do you, whenever you see a linoleum floor, do you look at it as like a big blank canvas, ripe for art?
I do now. I was actually shocked when I started using real linoleum to learn that it's not a synthetic material. It's actually made out of wood pulp and resin and that kind of stuff. So I now know way more about linoleum than I ever thought I would.
And how did you pick up this activity?
But it was actually right after October 7th of 2023, and I was going completely crazy in my head. There was so much to carry. And when I feel like I'm about to go crazy, what I do is I make stuff. And I had some of the materials on hand, and I had been in a real deep dive on They Might Be Giants, and a lot of the lyrics were knocking around in my head. And so I think it was around October 8th that I picked up my carving materials and started at it. And it basically got me through the year and then some. And this particular project, I only meant to make a few, and I ended up intentionally forcing myself to stop at 100, which maybe suggests a little bit, the level of stress I was experiencing. But yeah, that was actually where this whole thing started.
Yeah, you're about 10% through their catalog or something. So every They Might Be Giants band has an origin story of how they got into the band. What's yours?
This is entirely, I can entirely lay this at the feet of my children. It was during that really weird year of online school. So they were at home, but they were Zooming into their classes, and their teachers had to find ways to keep them engaged. And out of nowhere, my kids were walking around the house singing violin.
Violin, lin, lin, violin, lin, lin, violin, lin, lin, oh!
And there was something about it where it went from being what could maybe be kind of a normal song, and then it just gets more and more Dadaist as it goes on. And then I found the video, and I had been aware of They Might Be Giants, and when I was a youngster back in the 90s, but mostly what I heard out in the world was Istanbul and Particle Man, and they are more like novelty songs than most of their catalog, and that wasn't the part of them that really got me. So it was actually through No, their first children's album, and Violin grabbed me just because of how it takes a kind of normal children's format, and I think the Johns have talked about it starting out as one of these meet the orchestra type songs where this is the violin and this is the viola and this is the trumpet, but something happened on the way to the forum there, and it became something completely different, and you can hear it happen. And that might have been my first clue that there was something in the sensibility of this music that was going to resonate with something in my own head. Um, and so there were a few songs on that album that really grabbed me, and especially Sleepwalkers, which is beautiful and strange and made me think, okay, I know these guys have an adult discography. It's time to go check it out.
See them over there, see them moving down the road. Their arms held out ahead, and their eyes are closed.
I always found it interesting when they started to do children's albums because their regular albums are also very suitable for children. At least when I was a kid, I got into them, you know. The lyrics might be a little dark, but even the lyrics on a lot of their kids stuff is pretty dark for that kind of material. Like they're kind of slipping in messages that maybe you wouldn't expect to find if you're not listening carefully. So, you know, I don't even really in my mind make a big distinction between this is a kid's album, this is not a kid's album. I mean, even like the 1, 2, 3s and the ABCs has some pretty amazing stuff on there.
7 goes so much harder than it needs to. It's so hooky and it's so heavy and it's such a great song, and it's, you know, that's absolutely on my playlist.
Yeah, and speaking of Istanbul and Particle Man, I mean, I think a lot of people's first introduction was through Tiny Toons.
Istanbul was Constantinople, now it's Istanbul, now Constantinople. Been a long time gone, Constantinople, now it turns to light on a moonlit night. Every gal in Constantinople lives in Istanbul, now Constantinople. So if you have a date in Constantinople, she'll be waiting in Istanbul.
Yeah, weirdly, I missed that completely. And it might have been because I grew up in a kind of a religious Shabbos observant family, and so Saturday morning cartoons was absolutely just a whole world that passed me by. So my guess is that was mostly where folks were finding that.
Enjoying the show? Click like and subscribe. What inspired you to pay tribute to the band through your art?
So this is where my Jewish life and my rabbinic life and my TMBG superfan life kind of come together, because one of the things that really hooks me about They Might Be Giants and their songwriting in particular is that there are these little turns of phrases. I something you mentioned, I've been illustrating lyric fragments, and sometimes it's just that small, just the way this little image gets kind of trotted out in a song and it takes on a life of its own. And as somebody who's grown up on Jewish learning, I was a Jewish day school kid, K to 12. I went to rabbinical school. This is the world I've always swum in. Um, it seemed really ripe for a midrash. It felt a lot like some of those terse, uh, ancient texts that I was encountering my whole life. And part of the way I was raised and acculturated is that when you see a really juicy little piece of text, your job is to create in response to it, right? That's the entire midrashic enterprise, is people looking at something that feels rich and juicy and celebrating it, not just by repeating it and reading it or chanting it, but using it as a springboard to create more stuff. So I think maybe that was just a very trained response in me. Um, I also, in a lot of ways, see my rabbinic life as more an extension of my life as an artist rather than the other way around, in the sense that everything we do is, a creative response to being alive. But there's something about the way, I think Linnell in particular, but both Johns really, you can grab a little piece, and in the same way that I would do with a biblical text, you can either illustrate it in a way that's really contextual and sort of tells the story of a larger piece of the song than just that phrase, or you can completely decontextualize it and make it mean something completely different that was maybe never intended by the lyricist, but is fun and interesting. And I think the pieces I did probably fall around 50-50, how I decided to kind of treat them and illustrate them.
Yeah, I think what you're alluding to is the Ambi Giants' cleverness in their writing. I mean, there is no other band, current or past, that can approach their level of not only subject matter that they cover, but the way that they cover it and the way that their lyrics are so open to interpretation. And with all due respect to Bob Dylan, I think they're the ones who deserve that Nobel Prize.
I will back you till absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that there is a small, slim group of people who will agree with us.
The good people.
Right. And that's how you know who's worth knowing, really. That's how you sort them out. But I think for me, though, it's even more than cleverness, because there are plenty of clever writers. It's cleverness, but it's also beauty. Like it's legitimately beautiful a lot of times. I know that a lot of times when um, they're writing partly just for the sound of the words, and you can hear that. And I think also what sets They Might Be Giants apart from novelty bands, other than the fact that the writing really is different, and well, Weird Al is pretty musically serious too, so I don't want to start getting into that conversation. But um, there's always an emotional undercurrent to it. It's not just smart and cute and clever. There's always some piece of real human pathos. Um, that one of the weirdest experiences I had when I first started getting into the band was I was sitting there and I was listening to it and enjoying the cleverness, enjoying the literary references and the wordplay, and then all of a sudden I'm crying. Why am I crying? This doesn't make any sense. And part of it is that it's very, very subtly injected sometimes, but there are just these little truth bombs about being a human being, that are just peppered throughout these songs that will just catch you unawares. And that was part of also what felt really rich to kind of find those pieces. I don't want to digress too far, but one of the things, other than this project, another way that I've been artistically inspired by the band is I've started writing songs again. I did a bunch of liturgical settings, and then I actually started doing some of my own songwriting. And I ended up doing a series of speculative science fiction songs.
Issue 415 of Body Design. Time to get ready for the fall. Be sure you've got all the things you're not. If you've a thought of making it at all.
Sort of in the spirit of They Might Be Giants, my goal was to write these songs so that they told a story and they were kind of funny and interesting, but that they wouldn't be novelty songs, right? And so the question I had to keep asking myself while I was writing the lyrics is, what is the deep human pathos underneath this scenario I've cooked up? Like, what is it? Where is the heart of it? And I was like, what would the Johns do in this situation? A lot of the time, it kind of saved me from veering off into something that would have, been more of a novelty thing.
Yeah, they are in their own kind of category as far as that goes. I mean, it can be described as nerd rock, and I don't think that that's so far off, because it is for a specific sliver of the population, like you mentioned. But, it's not that different from the Beatles or the Kinks, who are doing kind of experimental variety kind of music. They're not really rock bands either, and they're not novelty. I don't think anyone would call the Beatles a novelty band, and certainly that label shouldn't be ascribed to the Ambi Giants either.
For sure. And I think about the Kinks and all the character songs they write. I mean, so many of their songs are character songs.
They call me Dr. Worm. I was working all night in my office. All I had ever wanted in my life. I would date the girl from Venus.
You made the leap from fan art to pro art when They Might Be Giants decided to use your interpretation of Synopsis for Latecomers, the opening song for their 2021 album Book, on an official t-shirt.
For everyone who only just arrived, a quick synopsis. If you came late and missed the commotion, and you wonder what was all that, here's the recap.
How did that come about?
If I claimed part of me over the course of this project wasn't hoping that, I might, kind of get on the radar, I would be I would be an absolute liar. But I also knew that, like, there could be no expectation, and if there was going to be any outreach from the band, it would be come from them and not from me. As it happens, John Flansburgh is super active on Tumblr. For those of you who don't know and who are interested in getting some questions answered by John Flansburgh, you can just go into the band's, go into the Ask, and he pretty much answers everything that comes through that's appropriate. So, I think we don't see a lot of the stuff that doesn't come through. And he also posts pretty much every piece of fan art that gets submitted as well, again, within the, limits of what's a good idea to put out as a band. And so one reason I knew they had to know about what I was doing was that I kept submitting the prints to the band Tumblr account, and they kept getting reposted. And I also happen to know, there's this Facebook group for fans of the band, and I was posting them in there too. And I knew that they're, probably partly because of the sheer volume of work I was turning out, because again, I was very stressed. Um, People started to kind of take notice and get a kick out of it, which was, again, probably part of the reason I ended up making 100 pieces, because, that's just like crack cocaine for an artist to just have an audience that understands what you're doing and appreciates what you're doing on all of the levels it's happening at and are interested in more. It's very, very hard to turn off the tap when, when people are thirsty. But anyway, yeah, so it was, I guess, about 6 months or so ago, I get a inbox message on my Tumblr account from John Flansburgh, completely riddled with typos, which, by the way, for most people would be an indication that it's like a scam account or something. But I was like, I know it's him, because he's notoriously, typo prone, as am I. So hard relate. But yeah, so he asked if I'd be interested in a project, and I said, yes, please, and thank you. And I ended up emailing back and forth with the band management, and it was super easy. They let me know which design they wanted. I had everything in digital files. I just sent them off, and they sent me a check, and now I've got a cool T-shirt, which is very exciting.
That's awesome. Could you tell us about your interpretation?
So the conceit of the song, right? Talk about a character song, right? The conceit of the song is it's some kind of government official or, law enforcement officials giving a press conference. And as they're talking, it becomes really clear over the course of the song that all kinds of insane, mysterious disasters are befalling this universe, this town, this city. And what is deeply funny to me and dark about the song is that the narrators of the song do not answer a single question, right? They're taking questions saying, oh, you're asking about this completely insane, horrible disaster. We know about it and we're doing everything we can, right? Absolutely no information. And so I was trying to capture in this print. I thought this was going to be the last one. It was number 24. And I was like, 24, that's a good place to stop. So this is the only one in the set that's 5x7 instead of 4x6, because it was going to be the grand finale. And so basically it's a city with all of these skyscrapers broken down and on fire, and their helicopters going around. And there's this giant serpent snake thing coiled around, the mountain that the city is on. And in the background, and they're a little bit cut off by the image, but in the background, it's the final, well, I guess you could call it the final lyrics of the song, which are, "That's all the questions that time will permit. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it right there. Be assured there is nothing more that can be done." And that's just kind of across the background is this, you know, the, I don't know. I don't want to put too fine a point on it
Well, not to put too fine a point on it.
because these songs resist that, and if you feel like you kind of kill the butterfly if you over-explain it. But just, oof, and it feels so on point right now. Just the sheer helplessness of being faced with disaster after disaster after disaster, and the people who are in charge are either producing the disaster or being completely ineffectual in managing it and giving the impression of competence where there is none whatsoever. I it was funny to me that was the design they chose. It's not the best of the bunch artistically. It's not the most successful piece, but I think it's the right choice for this project. I think part of it does have a more chaotic vibe than a lot of my other designs. Um, and, it is from their new album, so I think that they were probably happy to see something that wasn't, another retread of Flood. Um, and I do, it feels a little topical.
Yeah, I actually didn't appreciate their sort of anti-authoritarian tendencies until I got older and re-listening to some of their earlier stuff. Like, it's always been there.
Yeah, I mean, well, "Kiss Me, Son of God" is on Lincoln, right, already, and that is a song that I absolutely refuse to believe was not written in the last few years.
I built a little empire out of some crazy garbage called the blood of the exploited working class. But they've overcome their shyness, now they're calling me your highness, and the world's free. Kiss me, son of God.
They write really good character songs about assholes. They find just that voice of that that one guy you just absolutely hate for valid reasons, and they write from that guy's perspective, but in a way that's not actually redemptive. It's not trying to get you to understand or sympathize, but it's just, "Kiss Me, Son of God" is one of them, and there are a handful of others that are very much in line with that anti-authoritarian vibe, but they're all these character songs.
You also make whimsical needle felt figures, including a monstrous version of TMBG's John Flansburgh and John Linnell. What can you tell us about these?
That was a COVID thing. My mom bought me a little felting kit to make little, hedgehogs and things, and I discovered that I really, really liked an art form that let me stab something over and over and over again. And felting's amazing too because it is the most insanely versatile thing I've ever worked with because you can sculpt with it, you can make almost any shape, and then you can paint with it. And so for the two-headed Johnster, well, I started it before my first show and I finished it just after my first show. I actually very intentionally chose to do the Johns as they are now, as old guys. I made my little salt and pepper Flansburgh and my John Linnell with the very, very thick horn rim glasses. And it was great because as for my reference, I had just been at my first show and I was like watching them up close to make sure I was going to get it right. John Linnell and the accordion is such an iconic thing. And trying to problem solve that as a project was more than I wanted to deal with. So idiotically, I decided instead I would do Clippy, which is the nickname for John Linnell's, was it bass clarinet? Actually, it was probably way harder to make than an accordion. And I made Flansburgh's, mint green left-handed Telecaster.
What's the best way to follow and enjoy your art?
I am someday going to get a proper website up with all the stuff I've made cataloged, but it's actually become a pretty big job over time. So that's probably a little ways off. But in the meantime, most of where I put my art is up on Tumblr. This really, like it's supposed to be on Tumblr. Really just where I toss the stuff I'm making, wherever it's coming from. And as far as music goes, so if the other side of my They Might Be Giants inspo life, I am on SoundCloud, just Kelilah Miller. And for the Jewish audience too, that's also where I have all my liturgical settings too. So it's all there if you want to see what I've been up to and making.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelilah, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
And to our audience, now back to your regularly scheduled lives.
Amusing Jews is here to amuse you. If you like being amused, go ahead and click like and subscribe.